I'm Dane Rose, and in this video we're going to explore some of the relationships between polarities and opposites. All things begin with all that is, which in geometry is most elegantly expressed as the sphere. The one, the unconscious infinite representation of all that is, descends from the Garden of Eden, descends from unconsciousness into polarity, into the knowledge of good and evil. It could be any name, black and white, up and down, the knowledge of difference. Now, within a chauvinistic paradigm, one part must be better than the other. Here we diverge from science, because the first thing to understand about cutting a sphere in half is that if we cut it in half, rather than freehanding it as I have in this drawing, if we actually cut something in half, by definition, mathematically speaking, both halves are equal. You cannot have two halves, with one half being bigger or smaller than the other. So that's the first thing to understand about duality, polarity, and the cut. The second thing to understand is that the cut is primarily one of language. You can divide in your mind the rich and the poor, etc., but if you actually took a knife and cut the earth in half, it would no longer be the earth. Meaning, although we cut things up with words, in order to create distinctions. And a distinction is simply a difference in a pattern that is referenced with language and thus with thought. So the first thing to understand about duality and polarity is that they're equal. And the second thing to understand is that the one, that the interconnected ecology out of which duality emerges is interdependent. So if you want to have black, you have to have white in contrast. If you want to have up, you have to have down in contrast. If you want to have hot, it is dependent upon cold as contrast. So the second thing to understand is that all polarities are interdependent. In many ways, one creates the other. Now, the other thing to understand about polarities in their extreme, or on the continuum of extremism, is the principle of for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so if we take a pendulum and push it a little bit this way and let go, it goes back, and then it goes back, and it goes back, and then entropy takes over. But if we take this pendulum to the ultimate extreme, which is 90 degrees, and let it go, then it creates the opposite. In other words, intense imbalance or extremism in any area creates intense imbalance and extremism on the other side. And so, in this sense, we can see how in politics, the extreme left creates the extreme right as a countermeasure to the imbalance of the extreme left. And the extreme right creates the extreme left as a counterbalance to the extreme right. Now, in this type of conversation, the one extreme is always jeopardized by the other. The United States has recently become a terrorist nation in response to perceived terrorism, meaning with 9/11, the United States proceeded to create the Patriot Act, proceeded to invade and drop bombs on more than 1 million innocent Iraqis that were killed in this hunt for weapons of mass destruction. We had Guantanamo Bay and coercive torture tactics in which innocent people are raped, intimidated, drowned, beaten, dogs are set on them, etc. So the idea that the other side is extreme is often the justification for becoming more extreme. And so in this understanding, all we have to do if we want to have an extreme reaction over here is we have to create an extreme reaction to something that is imagined. Meaning, if we do nothing, we stay at center, we stay at balance. But if I imagine, if I want to create something, I have to pull this, I have to expend energy, pull this over here, and at some point, physics tells us there will be an equal and opposite reaction. And it'll take a period of time for that to come all the way back to center. So you can see that opposites create one another. And in that we can also see how war creates, how the extremism of war, how you can escalate extremism. You go imbalanced this way, I go imbalanced that way. You go imbalanced this way, I go imbalanced this way, and pretty soon we have extremism. So polarity are the poles of two extremes out of which all the nuance in life, all of the points in between, all time and space in between is created in the space between polarity. One pole is dependent on the other pole for definition, and the whole, the one, depends on the reuniting of both poles in an interconnected ecology. If you delete a portion of the one, if you, for example, take a pie slice of the Earth and delete it, well, if you took even 300 meters of the Earth in a pizza web all the way to the Earth's core and simply plucked that out and discarded it, the Earth would no longer be the Earth as we know it. Water would pour into that crevice. There'd be massive steam as the Earth's core was cooled down by the ocean water pouring into the core, and everything would be different. The gravitational spin would alter. There'd be more of a wobble. That wobble might dislodge things. Everything would be different if one piece is missing. And there's another important thing, because although a scientist will say that there is no rational difference between the value of up and down objectively. If you ask a scientist to explain whether men or women are better than one another, they'll be in a difficult place because you cannot give birth to a man or a woman without both, right? So it takes both to create life. So arguing who's better when it's very similar to arguing whether a plug or an outlet is better for the creation of electricity. You don't get electricity without a plug and an outlet. It's the combination between that creates the magic. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.